My name is Milani Salpitikorala. I am an attorney at law and I am the founder and senior legal consultant for Child Protection Force. Child Protection Force is an organization that provides legal aid, psychological help, safe housing, and a lot of public awareness, policy awareness on child protection in Sri Lanka. When I was a child, I lost my mother when I was very small, at 8 years old. And I had an amazing father who is my king, but who always believed in me. It was a lot of, and he used to put in words, like the word determination was a word that he had used when I was small a lot. And he said, this child is very determined. If she wants to get something done, she'll do it. So I was all about justice and, about making people feel good. And I have seen in my father's office, when there were people who came, he was a lawyer, and when there were people who came who were really victimized or who really couldn't afford a lawyer, I had seen that empathy. I had seen how he didn't charge certain clients, but I've also seen him be the devil himself. But he showed me that sense of empathy towards people. And there was a stray puppy near his office one day. So I wrote him a letter. All you have done is show me how to be kind, and this is how, as you teach me Buddhism, and this is what we need to do. So we need to rescue that puppy and take that puppy home. And I did get that chance. So it was a lot of, I didn't like to see people feeling sad, people feeling bad. And he also, just before he passed, so 2 weeks before he passed, he told his good friend, my first boss, you need to take care of her, because I can't be there to see her become a lawyer. So 2 weeks after he passed, I went to her, Justice Shirani Tilakawardana. So everything I built up from the way to talk, the way to walk, the way to present yourself, despite the rest of it, the legal work, but everything I needed to know to start up to get my idea and to get it going, I learned from her. So that was my inspiration. She connected me to Sajiva Samranayaka, who was a absolute asset to Sri Lanka, that Sri Lanka lost out of illness. But he was also my guru. He was a ardent child protection activist, child protection lawyer in Sri Lanka. So that is where the passion started. That is where the inspiration started. So as a child also, I was very stubborn. I still get it from my close family about how stubborn I am. But I also have that support system of my entire family who keeps me on tight reins, but also lets me go ahead and achieve that dream. So a lot of people, a lot of work that came into this, and today Child Protection Force is doing a lot of good work in Sri Lanka. So the path I actually wanted to become as a child, I wanted to be a veterinary surgeon because I was very passionate about animals. And then by default, because of family pressure, I became a lawyer. And the first few years as a lawyer, I remember, and as a law student, until you get into that phase of lawyer, I think that was maybe a lot of years of crying and crying and crying every day. I despised looking at the courtroom, because the courtroom is a place where a victim goes to seek justice. But when you actually walk into a courtroom as a victim, I haven't, but I have seen my clients. And walking into a courtroom as a victim is the most dreadful thing you can do, because it's very scary, it's very hostile. So that entire system is hostile. So did I want to become a lawyer? No, I didn't. I wanted to be a veterinarian. But somehow I met Justice Tilakawardana. I started my passion in child rights law. My first case that I actually tried to work on as a very junior was a biological father who sexually abused all 4 of his children. So the passion was there, and a lawyer, senior lawyer, who is a friend of my brother-in-law, told me one day, I went to him crying at that initial stages. I went to him crying and said, listen, this is not the job for me. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't like it. And then he said, Milani, you have good training. You've been educated. Take the ball and run. So that's what I did. I took the ball and I ran. And I ran and I ran and I ran. And here I am today trying to do work for children in Sri Lanka. I work with child protection. So I meet a lot of child survivors, women survivors who are violence on a daily basis. And I also work in schools. We work with children. We do awareness programs on child protection. And this morning, in fact, in a school that I was working, so you get a lot of different type of children, just like each one of us. Each one of us have our own stories. Five fingers are not the same. So why we fail to, as adults, identify that in children is a problem. So I mean, in a classroom, what do they say? What is that? හැමෝටම බෙදන්නේ එක හැන්දෙන්. ඒක කරන්න බෑ ඉස්කෝලවල. පොඩි ළමයි ඉන්න තැන්වල මොකද දරුවෝ 5 දෙනෙක් 5 විදියක්. අපි 5 දෙනෙක් 5 විදියක්. ඒක අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ. So even victimized children, cases that come to us, right? So every case is different, the facts are different, the person is different. So let's say it works for me to meet a psychologist once a week and to go in the healing path. But for someone else, maybe that's not what is needed. Maybe they need to go and have a swim in the sea once a week. So likewise for children, especially in the education system, we think that every child can go through this tunnel, which is the same tunnel for every child. That's really difficult. So you have to work with schools that have a little, I would say, less conventional schools, who let the child develop themselves. For example, I don't know whether it's a problem with a lot of parents, but the normal curriculum for, say, maths, science has become extremely difficult for these young children now. I'm talking adolescent children. So is there a difference that we need to make? The rest of the world has followed us, right? So a good example, I mean, is with these advertisements and with these is the Manchi Tikirimole. So the Tikirimole is meant to be a child's brain, and the advertisements were all done to show that something that they have figured out or someone has figured out. So then you have to identify that every child has a different way of thinking. Every child has a different way they have been brought up. This morning we were talking about children who come from families that have violence, so where parents are fighting with each other, parents are always hitting the children, and or children who are being disconnected, so parents who are not showing a lot of physical affection, not a lot of emotional affection. I can be sitting here next to my child, but if I am on my phone, I am not consciously present with my child. So that's what I'm saying. So it can be an emotional disconnection, it can be a physical disconnection, and these are things that the developing brain needs. And every developing brain, every child is brought in a different way. We have a lot of children who are in schools with neurotypical children. So there are neurodiverse children. And so even in every child, there's a different way of how they need to be spoken to, how they need to be treated in school or anywhere, even at home. So your first child may not be, is not definitely not your second child. They have different needs and different personalities, and that's what we need to work on. So one of your children may like STEM, one of your children may like to swim. And how do we identify that and nurture that? We tend to look at sometimes dreams and goals that we couldn't achieve, and we tend to try to make our children and pressure them into various sports that they simply don't want to do. Maybe there's a child who doesn't want to play cricket but comes from and this is just an example, comes from a very sporty, athletic family. But maybe this child is talented in something else like STEM or art. So this is what we need to identify, and as parents we get into that whole, I call it the rat race, that unfortunately I'm also in as a parent. We are going in this rat race of this conventional education system, which is hard in itself, but then also with the conventional sports and pressurizing the children into doing maybe something that they don't want to do. Maybe this is something we need to talk about. And what that happens within the family environment when children are put into that tunnel and to go, they tend to become vulnerable to crime, because they could be feeling that, it's not the neglect, but there's emotional disconnection, there's some sort of disconnection. So there may be instances where they can be vulnerable to crime. So that is where a whole child protection situation would come in. So as parents, as adults in Sri Lanka, we have a huge, massive responsibility to protect our children in society today and how things are working. I'm going to say it. 14 years of doing this job, child protection. So a lot of crime scenes that we have seen via pictures, a lot of stories that we need to read, a lot of children who are even close to us who have suffered crime. So it has been hard. And then after COVID started, we started also doing a lot of cases for women, so domestic violence, a lot of violence that we have seen on a daily basis. We come into office. I realized that it's not working out. I need to do something about myself. So I started meditating. I started doing NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. I am now a practitioner. And with that, I realized I need to go into Zen mode a lot. And one day I did this meditation with a French person I knew, a friend of mine. And so we were talking about what our purpose is. Why am I here? Why am I in this country? Why was I born to these parents? Why am I here right now? And the only thought that came to me was children in Sri Lanka. So I thought, okay, wait, I'm doing like this whole spiritual meditation for myself here. And this came out, and this had already been about 5-6 years after I started doing child protection. I had absolutely no clue. And I have thought many times, even recently, even last week maybe, about giving up this job, because it takes a toll on your soul. For what you see, what you hear, the fights you have to do, the bureaucratic problems you have when you're trying to work with a child. So I have tried to give up. Even today, I will give this up immediately if I can, hand over to someone who is as passionate and, will take over. Because it's a huge toll on all of us, on my entire team. I have a wonderful team at Child Protection Force, and every day we go through these things. So, but every time a case comes, and the work we do for it to expedite it, and every time a client comes back to me with a polos curry or whatever they cook at home, or invite me for a cup of tea at their house, or say things like, you and your team saved our lives, we are here today because of you. So that has kept me going on, and that is where the purpose is, I believe. So even if I stop doing the operational work of actually looking at these cases and reading things, I will definitely always advocate for child protection. That's a wonderful theme of where we need to allow children to build up their dreams in their own way, but also provide that guidance. So you may get a negative point of view on this, where people will say, you can't just let them build on their dreams and let them do nothing. So that's not what this is meant. I think this is meant about let them achieve their dreams on their own, but give them that proper guidance. So yes, a lot of Western countries have started on this, and they let children follow what they want to do with the proper guidance. And I think if we allow this, and the world goes back to where it was more peaceful, and I think that is what is needed right now.